I see you, I appreciate you, and I'm thankful you subscribed and keep showing up. This space is built on your insights. Leave your thoughts and lessons below. Now, cue the tension, cue the truth, let's get into it. Before the story starts, pay attention to the wording of that text. Now, can we talk about this? Would this bother you? It was a decision already made and dropped in my lap, like I was only there to absorb it. That is a boundary lesson worth keeping. When somebody tells you they are crossing a line, instead of asking whether the line should be crossed, the disrespect started before the dinner ever did. I was 13 hours into a double shift at the bus depot on Detroit's west side when my phone buzzed in the chest pocket of my coveralls. It was late February, the kind of gray day that never fully became morning, and the whole garage smelled like wet rubber diesel and the burnt coffee someone had abandoned near Bay 3. I had both hands inside the panel of a dead bus, tracing a wiring issue by flashlight when the vibration came again. I almost ignored it. Rochelle knew my double shift days. She usually left me alone unless something was wrong with the house or her mother. If that text already made your stomach drop, stay with me, because this cheating wife revenge story only gets messier from here. And while you are listening, like this video, share it with someone who loves relationship drama stories. And subscribe for more emotional first-person betrayal stories, like this one. I stepped back, wiped my fingers on a rag, and looked at the screen. Her message was short enough to read in one breath, and damaging enough to ruin the next one. Do not be mad. I am going to dinner with Lennox. We need to clear the air. Lennox was her ex from college, the one she described for years with a dismissive little shrug, as if he belonged to another life and another version of her. Standing there under fluorescent lights with my shoulders aching and sleet tapping the depot windows, I reread the text 3 times, hoping it would somehow become less arrogant. What bothered me first was not even the name. It was the structure of it. She was not asking. She was informing me. Rochelle had that habit when she wanted to make a selfish thing sound mature. She would put calm words around it and expect the calm words to do the moral work. I typed, erased, then typed again. I did not want a dramatic sentence I would regret. I sent, "You already decided, so do what you want, but do not expect me to help explain it later." Then I locked the phone and slid it away before anger could start writing for me. I had been married to Rochelle Boone for 7 years. We were the kind of couple people called solid because we paid bills on time, hosted Thanksgiving every other year, and sat in the same pew at New Hope Baptist without making a scene out of our affection. She worked in donor events for an arts nonprofit downtown. I was a mechanic for the transit department, the steady one with union hands, a pension plan, and a mason jar of old bus tokens on the kitchen shelf because my grandfather had driven coaches back when they still took coins and paper transfers. If you'd asked me 6 months earlier whether I worried about Lennox, I would have laughed. My concern had never been one man. It was Rochelle's hunger to feel chosen. She liked compliments the way some people like heat in the winter. She did not just want to be loved. She wanted to be noticed in bright light. At home, she lined up spices alphabetically, labeled leftovers with blue painter's tape, and corrected my grammar in greeting cards. Outside, she wanted the rooms to turn a little when she entered. I knew that about her. I had just never believed she would let it steer our marriage. I had a choice right there in Bay 3. I could pull off my gloves, cuss into the phone, and leave the depot with half a repair unfinished. Or I could finish the brake light circuit and the wheel sensor check on the bus that needed to be on the road before dawn. I stayed. That was decision number 1. And I made it because people who ride city buses at 5 in the morning do not deserve to be endangered because my wife suddenly wanted closure in candlelight. My father used to tell me, feelings are loud, responsibility still has to be heard over them. The rest of the shift crawled. Every socket wrench sounded sharper than usual. My apprentice, Jalen, asked me twice whether I was all right. I told him my head hurt and kept working. Around midnight, I finally clocked out, changed from coveralls into my coat, and stood outside the depot while the wind came off the river hard enough to sting my ears. My truck coughed before it started. The city looked washed in dirty silver. I should have gone home. Instead, I drove east toward Brush Park because that was where Rochelle liked to go when she wanted a place to feel expensive without admitting she liked expensive places. The restaurant I chose was one she had once described as too polished for regular hunger, which was exactly why I knew she might be there. Warm light spilled across the sidewalk. A valet in black gloves moved between cars. I parked half a block down and watched through the front window longer than I care to admit. There she was, seated in a curved booth, cream coat folded beside her, laughing with the same closed-mouth laugh she used when she wanted to look composed and delighted at the same time. Lennox leaned toward her in a camel overcoat, tapping the stem of his water glass with a ringed finger. I could have gone inside then. I could have walked straight to that table and let the whole room turn their heads. I pictured it very clearly, me still smelling like machine oil, her face draining, Lennox trying to square his shoulders like that meant something. But I stayed in the truck. That was decision number 2. I made it because public explosions give liars room to hide in the smoke. Quiet gives you details. From where I sat, I saw him reach over and rest his hand on her wrist while she did not pull away. I saw her smile and look down, pleased. I took one picture through the windshield, just enough to timestamp what I had seen. Then I drove to Lafayette Coney and sat in a booth by the steamed-up front window with a bowl of chili I barely touched. Past midnight. The place had its usual mix of tired nurses, men arguing over basketball, and one old woman in a church hat eating fries with a knife and fork like she had all the time in the world. I folded the paper wrapper from my gum into 4 perfect squares. Then 4 more. That is what I do when I am trying not to break something. Rochelle got home after 1. I heard her key, then the soft click of her heels in the hallway. When she stepped into the kitchen, she stopped cold. I was sitting at the table with the stove light on and my depot jacket still zipped up. She looked too carefully arranged for somebody who had just cleared the air. Her lipstick was fresh. Her earrings were changed. Rochelle only changed earrings mid-evening when she expected to be looked at up close. "You're still awake?" she asked. I said, "I saw you." She put her purse down slowly and answered, "Then you already know it was only dinner." Only dinner is one of those phrases people reach for when they want the format to erase the meaning. I asked her why she had texted me like a supervisor notifying me of schedule changes. She sighed, pulled out a chair, and told me she had not wanted a whole emotional performance. That made me laugh once, without humor. I told her she was right about one thing. She had avoided a performance. I gave her that. She asked whether I wanted to hear her side. I told her I did. She said Lennox had apologized for how he handled their breakup years ago and wanted closure before his new business launched. The story sounded prepackaged. Lennox had a new business. Lennox wanted closure. Lennox respected our marriage. Every sentence came out too quickly, as if she had rehearsed the tone on the drive home. I asked whether she had told him not to touch her hand. Rochelle blinked once, then said I was being dramatic. That word, dramatic, had become her shield over the last year. Any discomfort I expressed that interrupted what she wanted became drama. I told her I was sleeping in the den. She followed me down the hallway and said softer, "Isaiah, I did not cheat on you." I answered, "You definitely crossed something." The next few days felt strange in small ways that bothered me more than the shouting might have. Rochelle made my coffee too light, which meant she was distracted because she knew exactly how much creamer I used. She forgot to label the leftover baked ziti, which she had done religiously since our 2nd year of marriage. She left her phone face down and took it even to the bathroom. We still spoke. We discussed the gas bill and whether her cousin would bring greens for Sunday dinner. But every conversation had a missing center. We were acting married and not being it. That Sunday, my mother called while I was changing a wiper blade on my truck. Deaconess Bernice Boone never wasted words. "Is Rochelle still helping with the women's brunch setup next Saturday?" she asked. I said I assumed so. My mother was quiet for one beat too long, then told me Rochelle had missed the last planning meeting and sent an excuse about a migraine. That bothered her because the woman had already paid a deposit on decor. Rochelle promised she could arrange through a vendor friend. I said I would ask. My mother said, "Ask gently, but ask with both eyes open." Saturday morning, I stopped by New Hope before the brunch crowd arrived because I had promised to help move folding tables from the Fellowship Hall storage room. The basement smelled like coffee lemon cleaner, and the fish dinners the youth choir sold every first Friday. Near the kitchen pass-through, I saw a stack of cream-colored menus bound with twine. At the bottom, in elegant gold script, it read, Tate Table. Curated Dining Experiences by Lennox Tate. I knew that last name before I even bent down. My stomach tightened, so hard it felt like I had missed a step on dark stairs. I picked one up and flipped it open. The sample menu listed smoked trout dip, braised short ribs, bourbon bread pudding, and private event coordination by Rochelle Boone. There was printed like a partnership, not speculation, not old feelings. Partnership, her name under his. My first thought was not even anger. It was embarrassing. How long had this been moving through rooms where I was expected to smile and carry chairs like nothing was happening? My mother came around the corner with a tray of cups. She saw my face and asked what was wrong. I handed her the menu, her mouth pressed into a line, so thin it nearly disappeared. I could have told the whole basement right then. Everybody from Sister Colleen to the usher board would have listened, and by evening half the West Side would have had an opinion. I chose not to. That was decision number 3, and I made it because older women in church basements can turn pain into theater if you hand it to them raw. Instead, I folded the menu and slid it into my jacket pocket. My mother looked at me and said, "Not here." I nodded. She squeezed my forearm once and went back to arranging napkins with face as unreadable as carved wood. That afternoon, I logged into our joint savings account because the furnace had started making a groaning sound, and I wanted to know what kind of repair we could absorb. 2 withdrawals caught my eye immediately. One was a wire transfer to Tate Table Hospitality. The other was a payment to a commercial kitchen incubator near Easter Market. The amounts were not ruinous, but together they represented half of what we had set aside for summer property taxes, and the small bathroom remodel Rochelle had insisted we should wait to do the right way. My chest got cold in a way the weather had nothing to do with. When she came home, carrying a paper bag from a bakery and acting as if nothing had shifted under our feet, I asked her to sit down. I put the printed bank statement on the table beside the church menu. She stared at both and did that thing she did when caught between versions of herself, where she blinked rapidly but kept her chin high. "It is not what it looks like," she said, which is such an exhausted sentence that I almost pitied her for using it. I asked, "Then what exactly does my wife funding her ex's business look like when it is innocent?" Rochelle rubbed her forehead and told me it was a short-term bridge, not funding. Lennox had investors lined up, but one backed out, and she believed in the concept. She said her nonprofit background gave her a good eye for events, and she was tired of helping other people build things while she stayed salaried and safe. Some of that sounded honest. That is what made it so dangerous. Real lies usually wear 1 or 2 true things as a coat. I asked why she used our savings without asking me. She said because I always hear risk as recklessness, and she needed one decision that belonged to her. I said, "Then you should have used money that belonged to you." She looked offended, which was rich under the circumstances. We had always kept one joint savings and separate checking for daily things. Using the savings without a conversation was not oversight. It was a strategy. Rochelle told me I was making business into betrayal because I felt threatened by Lennox. I asked whether she wanted to explain the hand on her wrist too. She looked away. "That was nothing," she said. I answered, "Then you are spending our money and our trust on a whole lot of nothing." She cried after that, but the crying arrived late and thin. I called my cousin Felicia on my lunch break Monday. She was not an attorney, but she had worked 15 years for one in Wayne County Family Court and knew how men got sloppy when hurt. She listened without interrupting, then said, "Do not scream. Do not destroy anything. Document everything. Separate your checks today. And stop assuming her embarrassment will do your work for you." That sentence settled me. I changed my direct deposit before the shift ended. Then I opened a new savings account in my name alone and moved the amount I could legally move from my personal checking. It felt ugly. It also felt necessary. Rochelle noticed on Friday when the auto transfer did not hit the joint account. She called me while I was standing in line at a corner store buying windshield fluid and a pack of gum. "You move your paycheck?" she asked, sharp and breathless. I said yes. She told me that was punitive and controlling. I leaned against the drink cooler and said, "No, Punitive would have been telling your board chair before giving you a chance to explain yourself. This is me refusing to underwrite confusion. She went quiet, then accused me of enjoying the power. I told her I would enjoy a truthful week. We had not had one yet. Over the next 2 weeks, our marriage became a house of partial truths. Rochelle claimed she was working late with donors. Then she came home smelling faintly of wood smoke and expensive citrus, not office air. She said she had vendor site visits. Then Miss Ernestine from across the alley mentioned seeing Rochelle's car parked overnight on a different block 2 Thursdays in a row when she walked her little white dog before sunrise. I did not even tell Miss Ernestine the details. Older women simply notice patterns the rest of us blunder through. Every scrap of outside information kept matching the dread already growing inside me. I went to Trey's barbershop on a slow Tuesday because I needed my hair cut and because barbershops hear things before they become official. Trey had known me since high school and knew how to talk around a wound until a man was ready to name it. While he lined my beard, another barber on the next chair was talking about a private supper series trying to raise startup money. That dude Lennox, he said, walks in here every week like he already got a magazine cover. Keeps saying he found a woman with nonprofit ties and a husband with good credit. Trey met my eyes in the mirror and said nothing. I went home with the cape still prickling phantom hairs down my neck and checked our shared tablet, the one Rochelle only used for mood boards and event software. She had forgotten to log out of her email. I was not proud of looking, but pride had already cost me enough clarity. What I found was not flirtation. It was infrastructure. There were budget sheets, venue sketches, investor decks, and a draft operating agreement for a Tate table. In the footer of one document, under secondary guarantor, sat my full name, my income bracket, and our home address. She had written me into the plan without ever asking me. That was the moment the air left my body. Dinner with an ex was ugly. Emotional overlap was ugly. But being converted into collateral by your own wife is a different species of betrayal. Rochelle had not just wanted validation. She had wanted access. There were also donor contact exports from her arts nonprofit, tagged by giving capacity and neighborhood, and a note from Lennox that read, "Your people trust your taste." Once we land 3 anchor investors, the rest follows. I had to set the tablet down and walk to the sink because I suddenly thought I might get sick in a very undignified way. I did not confront her immediately. I printed everything at the 24-hour copy shop near the old grocery warehouse, bought a yellow legal pad, and wrote dates down in order until the timeline stopped wriggling. Text, dinner, church menu, bank transfers, investor deck, my name, donor list. I kept hearing Felicia's voice. Embarrassment will not do your work for you. Rochelle had counted on the fact that I hated scenes more than most men hated being wrong. She was not entirely mistaken. I hated scenes, but I hated being used more, so I chose the process. That was decision number 4, and it changed the rest of my life. 3 nights later, I told Rochelle we needed to talk at the kitchen table after dinner. She seemed relieved at first, probably assuming I had tired myself out and was ready to bargain. She had made salmon with the lemon pepper I liked and folded napkins like we had company coming. I waited until the plates were in the sink before I set the stack of printed emails and budgets in front of her. Her face changed in slow stages. Surprise, calculation, then fear. "You went through my things," she said. I answered, "No. I found the part where you turned me into one of them." Rochelle tried 3 explanations in 10 minutes. First, she said my name was only there as a placeholder for investor formatting. Then she said Lennox added it without her approval. Then she said she planned to tell me after the concept was fully shaped because I shut down possibility too early. I let each version land and fail on its own. Finally, I asked a simple question. "Are you in love with him?" She stared at the window over the sink, where sleet had started ticking against the glass, and said, "I do not know what I am right now." That answer hurt more than a clean yes would have. I asked whether anything physical had happened. She pressed her lips together, then said, "That is not the point. People only say that when it is very much the point." I did not demand details. I did not want my mind furnished with them. I asked whether she had spent the night with him. Rochelle whispered, "Twice." Then, after a pause that insulted me by pretending restraint mattered anymore, she added, "Maybe 3 times if you count the night we worked through the tasting menu until morning." I leaned back in my chair because if I had stayed leaning forward, I might have said something beneath myself. The next morning, I told her I wanted a formal separation. She cried hard then, the kind that bends your shoulders and makes your nose run, which would have moved me in some earlier chapter of our marriage. But pain is not the same as innocence, and tears do not make a person less responsible for planning around your trust. Rochelle asked whether we had to involve family. I said only if she forced me to by lying first. By Saturday, she had done exactly that. Her mother called me and said Rochelle told her I was spiraling because she wanted to start a business and reclaim her independence. That lie irritated me enough to become useful. I told Rochelle we would all sit down Sunday afternoon at Aunt Mavis's townhouse because I would not be turned into some wounded tyrant to protect what she had actually done. Aunt Mavis was her mother's older sister, all pressed slacks and peppermint breath, and she happened to sit on the advisory council for the same arts nonprofit Rochelle worked for. Not a full board member, but close enough to understand donor relationships and ethics without needing them explained. Rochelle begged me not to include her. I said, "You made your work part of this the minute you exported those names." Sunday came raw and windy. Aunt Mavis's dining room smelled like coffee, furniture polish, and the sweet potato biscuits she always baked too dark on the edges. Rochelle sat across from me in a brown sweater, eyes swollen from what I assumed had been a sleepless night. Her mother, Clarice, kept dabbing at her throat with a napkin as if discomfort had become physical. My mother sat beside me in a navy church suit, silent and straight-backed. I did not enjoy any part of that scene. I wish that were less true. Revenge that looks satisfying from the outside usually feels heavy while you're carrying it. Rochelle started talking first. She framed everything as a marital rough patch worsened by ambition, old history, and my rigidity. She said Lennox had offered a creative partnership that made her feel seen. She said I reacted by freezing her out financially. Aunt Mavis let her finish. Then she turned to me and said, "All right, Isaiah, give me the version with paper in it." I slid the folder across the table and walked him through it from the text message all the way to the investor deck. Not fast, not theatrical, just date by date, page by page, until the room went still. Clarice covered her mouth halfway through. My mother did not move at all. Aunt Mavis read the donor list twice, then took off her glasses and cleaned them with the hem of a dish towel the way she did when trying not to curse. "You pulled prospect names from your employer for a private venture?" she asked Rochelle. Rochelle mumbled that she had only been identifying likely audiences, not soliciting directly. Aunt Mavis said, "That is not a distinction anybody in compliance is going to respect." Rochelle looked at me then with something close to hatred. Not because I had lied, because I had stopped helping her keep the rooms separate. While we were still sitting there, her phone lit up on the table. "Lennox." Nobody touched it for 1 ring, then 2. Aunt Mavis said, "Put on speaker." Rochelle whispered no. Aunt Mavis repeated herself, sharper. Rochelle answered with trembling fingers. Lennox's voice came through smooth as ever. "Tell me your husband did not actually send that notice," he said. "Our investor lunch is Tuesday. I need to know if the household guarantee is still good." Nobody in that dining room breathed for a full second after he finished. Rochelle closed her eyes. She did not need to confess another thing. He had done it for her. I had sent that notice the night before by certified mail to the attorney listed on the draft agreement, revoking any use of my name, income, property, or marital assets in connection with Tate Table. I had also frozen the joint line of credit and scheduled a consultation for legal separation Monday morning. Lennox called again after Rochelle hung up, but no one answered. Aunt Mavis stood, walked to the sideboard, and returned with her work phone. She told Rochelle she would be informing the nonprofit's executive director that donor data and professional contacts may have been misused. Rochelle began crying in earnest then, but the train had already left. The consequences did not explode overnight. Real life usually does not give you that kind of cinematic neatness. First came her suspension from the arts nonprofit, pending review. Then the investor luncheon was canceled because the attorney representing Lennox's startup asked for revised financial disclosures and found there was no secured backing after all. Rochelle moved into the guest room for 3 weeks because neither of us could afford stupidity in the middle of legal paperwork. We passed each other in the hallway like people waiting at the same clinic for different bad news. The house became so quiet I could hear the refrigerator cycle from the living room. In that stretch, Rochelle tried on several versions of remorse. One night she said she felt invisible beside my routines, my early shifts, my quiet nature, my habit of coming home tired instead of dazzled. Another night, she said Lennox had represented a more adventurous self she thought she had buried under bills and choir rehearsals. Some of what she said was painfully human. That is another thing nobody tells you. Betrayal does not always come from monsters. Sometimes it comes from ordinary selfishness mixed with vanity and fear, which can actually hurt worse because it means the destruction was built with everyday hands. I did not take the bait of trying to become her therapist after she wrecked our marriage. I listened once, then told her she could explain herself to a counselor, her pastor, and the lawyer, not to me at midnight in my own kitchen while I was still paying half the utilities. A month later, she moved into a lower-level apartment her cousin rented out near Southfield. She took the white dishes, her labeled storage bins, and the framed photo from our Mackinac anniversary trip. I kept the bus token jar, the cast-iron skillet from my grandmother, and the den couch where I had first realized we were no longer safe inside our own story. By early summer, the nonprofit's review had ended. Rochelle was asked to resign. No criminal case, no headlines, nothing that dramatic. Just a formal separation from a respectable job because she had blurred donor resources with private ambition. Lennox's venture never opened. One investor backed away when he learned Rochelle was no longer attached. Another apparently did not like the smell of litigation. Trey told me months later that Lennox had started freelancing private tastings out in the suburbs, still overdressed, still talking too big. I did not feel triumph hearing it. Just a flat acknowledgement that inflated men usually land exactly where gravity puts them. Our divorce mediation took place in a beige conference room that smelled faintly of copier toner and old carpet. Nothing about the end of a marriage looks the way pain imagines it. There was no dramatic final speech. Rochelle wore a soft gray blouse and looked older around the eyes. At one point, while the mediator explained the sale of some shared furniture and the final distribution of accounts, Rochelle glanced at me and said quietly, "I thought you would yell, 'Disappear for a weekend, then come back.'" I said, "That was your whole plan, Rochelle. You built this around me staying predictable." The last time we spoke alone was outside the courthouse. It was early October, bright but cold in the shade. She asked whether I had done all of it to punish her. I told her no. Punishment would have been me trying to embarrass her in every room she entered. What I did was different. I stopped lending my silence to her version of events. I protected my name, my money, and my peace, and then I let the truth arrive where she had carefully kept it from going. She looked down, nodded once, and said, "That was enough." She was right. It was. If this story hit you hard, and you want more first-person drama stories about betrayal, cheating, revenge, and hard-earned closure, like this video, share it with someone who would have a lot to say about Rochelle, and subscribe for more stories that go deeper than surface-level drama. What stayed with me in this one was not the restaurant window, or even Lennox on speaker asking whether the household guarantee was still good. It was that folder on Aunt Mavis's table, because betrayal usually survives by keeping love, money, family, and work in separate rooms. The lesson is simple and hard. When somebody uses your decency as a hiding place, you do not need a louder voice. You need boundaries, records, and the courage to stop protecting them from the truth. The end.